Yeah, that's right. So welcome everyone to the May 18th Easthampton Development and Industrial Commission meeting. I'm Gwen Morrissey, the chair, and I'm going to begin our meeting with a reminder that pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the EDIC is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public is permitted. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A recording will be made available via Easthampton Media afterward. The state of emergency will be lifted in mid-June. We will see what future EDIC meetings look like later than that. Okay, so I'm going to open the EDIC portion by reminding us of our mission, which is to support and enhance the economic environment for current and future businesses, residents, and the community at large. The first item on our agenda is to address the April 20th, 2021 meeting minutes. Has everyone who was at the meeting had a chance to review those minutes?
Yes.
Great. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Second? Okay, very good. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving the April 20th, 2021 meeting minutes, show me with your hands or say words that tell me that.
Aye.
Okay, unanimously approved. Very good. Thank you so much. We don't have members of the public here at this time, from Easthampton anyway, so no public speak. Next up is a presentation and a question and answer period on vacant storefronts policy in Arlington. We are joined today by Allie Carter of Arlington, the town of Arlington. Why don't we go around and say who we are so you know who you're talking to, Allie? Mo, would you like to start?
Sure. I'm Mo Billivo, and I am the Executive Director for the Easthampton Chamber of Commerce.
Lovely. Tom?
Tom Brown. I am, I would say recently, but it's 2 years this month. I've been retired after 45 years of banking in the city of Easthampton.
Mm-hmm. Chris?
I'm Chris. I'm a book dealer in town. That's about it.
Josh? Josh, who are you?
Hi, I'm Josh Rosenblatt. I'm just Josh Rosenblatt. I'm just a citizen of Easthampton. Moved here in 2002. Have been involved in the EDIC 8 years, I think, maybe 8 or 9 years. Quite a while. So, welcome, Allie. We look forward to your presentation.
Very good. Paul?
Hey, Allie. I'm Paul St. Pierre. I just resident of town. I serving on different public committees and stuff, and I run a manufacturing company in Agawam.
And I'm Gwen Morrissey. I'm the chair of the EDIC. I'm also a resident in town. I work in Northampton for an educational service agency, the Collaborative for Educational Services. So, Allie, we have invited you here today because we are very interested in how Arlington operates its vacant storefronts policy, maybe fee structure, things along these lines. We would love to know how that's worked, what it took to get there, how it's working. So if you've got stuff to share, we would love to hear it. And then we would love to pepper you with questions if you are open to that.
Yeah, of course. It's nice to meet you all. Thank you so much. Can I share my screen?
Let's see. Oh, we've got another member joining us. Can you share your screen? Great question. I want to say yes, but I don't know.
I think they need to be.
Screen button at the bottom of your screen or no? Oh, look at this. Who can share? All participants.
Oh, there we go. I can now.
All right.
Okay, great. Let me get to full screen here. From beginning. Does that look good for everyone?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, great. So, oops, I forgot to change the date at the bottom of this. I probably shouldn't have pointed that out because no one would have noticed. I did update it for you all, but the first time I made this presentation was November 4th, 2019, in a totally different world. So my name is Allie Carter. I'm the Economic Development Coordinator for the Town of Arlington in the Department of Planning and Community Development. I joined the staff in Arlington in November of 2016, and just about within a week of my arrival, a special town meeting passed a bylaw to regulate vacant storefronts in town by creating a vacant storefront registry. And so I will take you through that process, a little bit of the history and how it's been going. Let me see here. Okay. So I like to start with a disclaimer because I am here to provide information, but I am not here to make a hard sales pitch for doing this kind of thing, especially not as a first step. This is not a one-size-fits-all solution for vacant storefronts. There are still vacant storefronts in Arlington. Turnover is a normal thing, and sometimes it takes longer than other times. So I just like to say that up front, especially when there's like real estate folks in the audience, because I can like get the daggers in their eyes right from the jump. Okay, so why did we create this bylaw? So in June of 2015, there were 17 vacant commercial properties in our central business district, Arlington Center. That 17 did not arrive overnight. What happened was that there were places that were closing and they weren't getting reoccupied. And over the course of about 18 months, a year to 18 months, it amounted to too many for the members of the public to be comfortable with. And many of these spaces, as I said, over time, they accumulated and a lot of them weren't being refilled. So some of them were vacant for a year or more and people had it. Residents were just like, enough. We need to do something about this. Oops, wrong way. Before I get into that, I will say that one of the things we did before we went to the bylaw phase of the game was we sat down with the property owners, because looking at the makeup of the vacancies, they basically were, the overwhelming majority of them were in the hands of 3 property owners. And so the town leadership sat down with each of these folks, invited them to meetings to say, what's your plan? Are you redeveloping? Are you selling? What is your plan for your property? And one property owner was just a sort of savvy businesswoman, and she was just carefully curating her property and waiting for a good tenant. And she found one and they've been successful. And so, when we heard that, we were like, okay, sounds good. Another person said things to the effect of, I don't rent to men. I don't rent to restaurants. So things that aren't legal, but in the context of getting that information, we couldn't do anything about it, right? She wasn't discriminating against us. She was just telling us how she was discriminating. And as you know, there's housing law, but there's not any legal body of law for commercial real estate. So it just is a very transactional thing. So we just knew that was someone we could not work with. This person was not being reasonable. And then lastly, and I'm sharing this with you to just give you, because these are the real issues we grapple with, right? Property owners are individuals, and sometimes properties are as unique as the individuals who own and occupy them. And then another person, actually, a third property owner said to us, I do not care about this property. This property is not worth, he actually said, the dirt on the bottom of my shoe. that it was the town's fault that he couldn't rent it, and then we said, well, are you going to sell it? And he said, I buy, I don't sell. So 2/3 of the majority property owners of these vacancies made it clear to us that they were not people we were going to be able to have a conversation with. So we came up with our bylaw, Title 5, Article 17. I know this is very like text heavy, but our town council is brilliant. And I think the real genius of this bylaw and what makes it work and why, frankly, we haven't gotten sued yet because of it is because of this language at the beginning. The purposes of this bylaw are to protect the welfare and economic vitality of the residents of the town of Arlington by protecting property values, and so on and so forth. But essentially what we're saying with this bylaw is commercial property owners who don't maintain their properties can impact residential property values, and they have a responsibility to have a certain level of maintenance of their properties. And then sort of the underlying basis of that, vacant commercial and industrial properties can degrade the vitality of Arlington's business districts, frustrate local planning and development efforts, create increased specific risks of fire damage, vandalism, and unlawful entry or uses, and give rise to other public health and safety hazards. So again, these are the negative impacts these types of properties, when left vacant, can have on a community. The bylaw is intended to promote the town's public welfare and economic health by requiring all property owners to register and properly maintain vacant commercial and industrial properties. So what do we mean by vacant? Early on, it was a shorter period of time, but we've since revised the bylaw to have vacant mean no tenancy for 90 days or more. So you have 3 months to find a tenant. That realistically is a pretty short window of time for a commercial property to turn over. As I said before, commercial tenants have no legal protections outside of their lease, outside of the legal contract between them and the property owner. So it kind of takes a couple months at least to negotiate properly a lease and figure out how you're going to build it out, the space out and stuff like that. But originally the bylaw was written as 21 days, which is ridiculous and impossible to enforce, but also just kind of very short. That's even short for a residential property. So 90 days was kind of politically the longest we could get away with extending it to. So the fee is a $400 annual registration fee per vacant storefront. That's where I sort of get to where, this is not a one size fits all solution. So a $400 fee for, a property owner like a REIT that owns property in Harvard Square and, our neighboring community, Cambridge, that's not even like a business lunch. It's not going to be a blip on their radar. It's appropriate for the environment in Arlington. It also has to tie back to a real town fee. We can't just arbitrarily make up the number. So the bylaw requires quarterly building inspections to occur to make sure the property is maintained and safe and everything's in good condition. And we charge $100 per inspection. So that's what that $400 fee ties back to realistically. And it also was enough to, not so much that it would really, burden someone financially, but to get the point across that, we're serious about this. We want you to kind of notice and feel some pain a little bit. So the fee can be waived for property owners who demonstrate financial hardship or who choose to display or otherwise activate their storefront. So we've had cases where, there's an empty storefront and I send out the notification letter, and someone calls me. It's like, my dad, is having medical issues. He's managed the property where, we cut people a lot of slack. When I hear that, I say, call me in 6 months or I'll call you in 6 months and we'll see how things are going. Usually 3 months. Other times there's legal cases at play where a subletter is suing, a tenant suing a subletter, and there's a lien on all the property in the building. So the property owner can't legally rent the space. We can't penalize someone for that. So we just sort of keep checking in quarterly. And we also want to give people the option to, make the storefront attractive. So we work with local artists. We'll put out a call to artists to do some sort of installation in the space. So at least beautifies it while the space is for rent. The for rent sign always has to be visible with the art installations, because the point is to get the space rented, but also to just make it more attractive while it's empty. Yeah, and the property owner, when we reach out to them, if we're considering giving them a waiver, they have to sort of make a claim like, we're advertising it. There's not just like no sign or, a paper plate with a phone number written on it and ballpoint pen. What are you doing? What efforts are you putting forth to find someone to get into this space? So that's a conversation I have with them. But if you don't register, and we send a couple warnings, and if people don't register, they get fined $100 a day. We've only had to do that once, and they paid after 4 days. So they would have just saved themselves a whole bunch of time by registering in the first place. But there you have it. So we will do it if we need to. And just sort of who was involved in the creation of this bylaw. I think I said at the beginning that residents were the ones who really started sounding the horn about this and just saying this is unacceptable, that there's this level of vacancy. We're like 5 miles outside of the city of Boston, and we have this like derelict commercial district. So there were this, Facebook group, Support Arlington Center, came together. And then actually later on, a group in the Arlington Heights neighborhood also came together to kind of advocate and tell the town, you have to do more than just saying we can't control this. And so it involved town staff in the planning department, in the legal department, and in the town manager's office and inspectional services to make this all work. And then it ultimately had to be passed by town meeting, which this again, contextually, it really depends. I talked to a lot of people about this because we're one of the few places that's really put something on the books. It's much more politically difficult in a city to get this done. A representative town meeting like in Arlington, most residents don't understand commercial property, real estate. They don't care. They don't have sympathy for the business owners. They're just like, the store needs to be filled, fill it up. So it passed like over 90%, like overwhelming support at town meeting for this bylaw. And is it successful? Yes. Is it perfect? No. Like I said at the beginning, it's not like a one size fits all. There's still vacancies in town, but it absolutely worked. Within a year, just in that one central business district, the number of vacancies went from 17 to 5. Before we even started enforcing it, properties that had been on vacant for 6+ years were rented. It was just the nudge that was like, hey, we're good. We're watching. This is unacceptable. It was just enough of a prod to motivate some folks, because again, and I'm sure it's the same there in this area, there's people who have huge real estate portfolios, and their, little Arlington property is a write-off for their profits and their other properties in, the bigger cities in the area. And we were just saying, we're not your write-off. You have to expend some effort in advertising and tenanting your buildings. I know so much about every little storefront. I know so much I have relationships with the property owners now. At first, they don't want to talk to me. They get my letter and it's like, why is the government getting in the way of my private property business? But after I talk to people and they realize that I'm trying to help, I can provide information that might, town plans that might show, what there's a demand for, market studies, or even send them referrals. And I'm not a broker and I don't take a percentage. I've become much more friendly with these folks, and I just know a lot more about what's going on where, which I really wouldn't otherwise have that information without this bylaw. So the real talk is that these are sort of the downsides to it, or the less than perfect aspects of it, is that some property owners will lease to a less than ideal tenant, sketchy massage parlor, cash for gold, whatever, first person who comes along just to vape shop, however you feel about any of those things. I apologize if I'm offending anyone, but just to not have to pay the fee, they'll just, and we have had a couple of places that later got, shut down for human trafficking. So, that could happen anyway, but it has happened since this bylaw went into effect. And you can't really pick and choose with this kind of, using this kind of tool. It's sort of a blunt instrument. If you pass a bylaw, it's, I can't say, East Arlington, there's a very low vacancy rate, so we don't need to do it over there. Or I know Richard, he's a good property owner. He's just looking. Everybody has to be part of this. I have to hold everyone accountable. They can I can give them a waiver. They can do an art activation, but I even people who are making an earnest effort, and there might be things out of their control, like right now, market forces, state regulations, zoning that makes their property difficult to rent. They're subject to it. So we try to have the waiver, the art waiver and the hardship waiver. But again, this really applies to everyone, even people you like who are doing the right thing. The art installations at first were kind of rugged, got off to a rough start. A lot of back and forth about liability waivers and picking up keys and who's paying for this and that. And after doing this for a couple of years, we just learned that the easiest thing to do is to paint the outside, just to paint the glass. It comes off pretty easily. It shows up much better than, what's that? Yeah, in this picture, see, this is an installation here. So you have to go up and look in the glass, and on a certain times of day, actually on this overcast day, that showed up very nicely, but you can't really see. And it's someone put their love and creativity into something, and then it gets put in a kind of derelict storefront. It wasn't a good feeling for the artists, and some of the property owners sort of treated it like it was this big pain in the neck. Whereas, if you compare it to this, it brightens up the whole neighborhood so much better, and you don't have to deal with any of that liability stuff, and the artists can just roll up outside at their convenience, paint. This was actually done by it was sort of a paint by number, and there were kids who helped with it, and it was really nice. And then there's, this will always be the case, but there's just this continual perception versus reality issue with vacant storefronts where, it varies from situation to situation, but sometimes there's a property that's leased, but it's vacant. Banks like to do that a lot. They'll have a 10, 15-year lease, and then they open up a new branch, but their landlord keeps the lease active at their other branch, and they're the best tenant in the world because they pay every month and they're never there. This doesn't address that kind of situation. And sometimes people are just in a permitting process, and sometimes permitting process take a long time. Sometimes it's the town's fault, sometimes it's not. But there's always going to be some level of vacancy. I've had people say to me, I will not stop advocating until there are no vacant storefronts in town. Well, you're never going to stop advocating. There's always going to be some level of, if there was no turnover, that's actually not a healthy local economy. Businesses change hands, things happen, people retire. It's just part of life. So it's kind of never enough in some cases. People think the town still doesn't do enough, and it's where we let things slide a lot. But all in all, it is effective, and it has gotten quite a bit done in our community the last 5 years. So if you're asking yourself, will this work in my community? I would say, really do your homework and exhaust all other options first. This is a labor intensive process. Every month cataloging, we subscribe to a commercial real estate database. There's cost to it. There's staff time. There's just a lot of legwork. I still have to drive up and down Mass Ave to, once a month I check the real estate listings, but then I have to go find the paper plates that are just taped to the glass. And you have to be sensitive to the political realities. Again, in a city where I'm just speaking generally too, don't take any of this the wrong way, but let's say you have elected officials who may be, supported by developers. It's going to be a much harder sell to them to sign on to something like this compared to Arlington Town Meeting with a bunch of residents who are just yeah, landlords, get your act together. And it's not a one size fits all. You can't just copy and paste what we did in Arlington. Everything should be sort of tailored to your community's economic needs, and so on. So I think that is the end for me. I'll stop sharing and take any questions. I just noticed the Antonio's shirt, and I just want to say thank you for that as a UMass alum. Good memories.
I have a question, if I may. Actually, a couple questions. You said try and make sure you exhaust all other options before you go to this. I'm curious as to what other options would be. But also, the other question I had first was, when you met with the vacant storefront owners, you didn't do it all. You went to them individually, right? Mm-hmm. And not on mass. Okay. So what other options you think there are to exhaust that you could think of?
So there's, in those meetings, one of the things that was happening at the time we were passing this bylaw is that we actually had no mixed use. There was no mixed use allowed in Arlington zoning bylaw. And so that was actually on the same warrant at the same town meeting. So that was one of the things we were like, are you looking to redevelop? Is it because mixed use isn't allowed? Are you looking to sell? Is there something, is there some sort of process that the town has that is making it difficult for you to manage your property? Is the zoning in this neighborhood so restrictive that you just can't find a tenant and you're constantly running people through? But the zoning was written, like so many other places, in 1978, and so there's no yoga. So to open a yoga studio, you need to go through a 3-month minimum special permit process. Those kinds of other regulatory issues or market issues that can be indicators of why a space isn't being leased. And when we talk to these people, one was totally get it. You're just hustling, and she ended up, getting Cafe Nero, and that was fantastic. But the other two were just, one basically said, this is my write-off, and I'm not trying to even rent this. And another said, I'm discriminating. Everybody in, there's just more allowance for discrimination with commercial. And I don't mean it in like necessarily a bad way, but commercial property owners can say, I don't think this business is going to succeed. This person doesn't have a successful business model. And that can be a valid and legal reason for them to not agree. I get in trouble for this sometimes, but I actually think it's kind of like dating. You're entering like a legal contract and relationship with someone, and you need to carefully consider and feel out who this person is before you enter into that. So that's okay, but it's not okay to say I won't rent to men. Like that's not okay. So again, those two people who both owned a ton of property and like whole entire blocks in our central business district, we knew we couldn't work with them, and we had to do something that was a little more heavy-handed.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good.
Sure.
Allie, thank you so much for coming today. And I apologize I honestly just forgot. I'm on work vacation and life caught up with me. But thank you so much for coming today.
No worries. I was a couple minutes late because I was like wiping up a ice cream accident because I'm still parenting and working at the same time. So
Thank you.
We're all just humans right now.
Other questions for Allie?
I've got a question about the $400 fee. I imagine you guys went through a whole lot of process to find that number. Were there any red flags about doing something per square foot, like 50 cents per square foot as the registration fee, or does that come into some sort of discrimination against certain types of places?
I know there's different rules for cities and towns, but I think it's the same for that. You have to, any fee you set has to tie back to like a real cost that the town has. And so I had to back into that, like what is this? And for the penalty, you can be much more loose with that. And so that's where we're like $100 a day, like you're going to notice that very quickly. But the fee, it was really just me at my desk, honestly, just looking at like what's involved in a process of opening a business, or what's involved in what are we requiring people to do with this bylaw. So the quarterly inspection was what got me there. I know the city of Cambridge, which is actually where I live, is looking at doing this. And one thing they have looked at is like a penalty per square foot. And they're running to a similar kind of justification issue with that. And also with like, again, when you have like a REIT or some like billionaire who lives in Shanghai that owns property in Harvard Square, and you compare that to like a mom and pop that owns just like one block in a neighborhood, you have to apply it the same way. You can't pick and choose. And so that's where they're running into problems. I know the city of San Francisco has a similar regulation that relates more specifically to like blighted properties, abandoned properties, and they charge like a percentage of the property value, which in San Francisco, I'm sure is like an eye-popping figure.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Allie, the registration part of this is something that's new to me. And obviously whatever we do, while Easthampton is a city and we have a 9-member city council, we're a very small city. So it's not that difficult to, if you present something that is logical and reasonable, it's not that difficult to get ordinances through our city council. Mm-hmm. But I'm not sure, or I guess I'm wondering, and obviously at the end, all of this would have to be run by our city attorney, but I'm wondering if we can skip this registration phase and just have a penalty.
Yeah, I don't know. And we ask people to register, and most people are happy to do it. But if they don't register, then there's the penalty. Part of the registration process too, I'll just share my screen again.
I guess I'm wondering what's the purpose of the registration?
Well, I'll show you. And this is kind of like one of the like nice guy parts of this. So I'm at our town's website and I go to economic development. Then I go to commercial property information and I update this. View a list of current commercial vacancies. They're all there. So, and you can see some of these names repeat. But this is when someone calls me and is like, hey, I'm just looking to open a business in town. I don't know where to get started. This is one of the places I send them. Or when someone, like yesterday, someone called me and said, my landlord is raising my rent 42% now. And what can I do about that? And I said, well, I don't know. You can continue to negotiate with them, but here's a list of other places that are for rent in town now. So the registration, I guess, that essentially is the registration list. The other thing that's good about it is that I track it over time. So you register for a year, and then if you renew, if you're still vacant, it's like, why am I coming to you a year later and asking you to pay another $400? Like, what's the deal? So I've only had to do that a couple times. So it does give people a little time.
I guess the reason I raised the question about the possibility of just going to penalty is some of our most significant downtown vacant properties are more than likely tear downs at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And so there's no point in them. I don't even think they could rent them. I think one of them is condemned. Mm-hmm. So I don't even know that they could lease them or rent them. But yet they continue to sit idle because there's no motivation to do anything. Probably our tax write-offs, for all I know. And our motivation is to say, again, we're not trying to raise money for the city of Easthampton. We're simply trying to incentivize you to do something with these buildings. These owners haven't been responsive. It did strike me when you talked about the meetings, and that's not a bad thing, but we know firsthand from one of our own members that reached out to one of the owners to see if they were interested in selling, and they just don't call back. Mm-hmm. So to me, the biggest incentive is to hit you where it hurts in the pocketbook.
So can I just clarify, because that's a really good point, Tom. And I'm wondering, Allie, what happens when the building inspector comes in for those quarterly inspections and the place is just mold infested or the electrical is just ripped out? What happens then?
We send pictures and fines with a certified letter that these are the things you have to do to fix this. You have to do it by this date. So we have done that before. We did that to Dirt on My Shoe guy. Yeah, we actually, when he came in for the meeting, we went and took pictures that morning, like a half hour before he sat in the chair, and we were just like, look at this. And he was saying all the stuff about how great he maintains it and how it's the town's fault. And we were like, here's a rat burrow. Here's like all this, here's trash. But every situation is different, right? Like you're describing something that's not happening here with like condemned buildings in your downtown. And I know that one thing we've looked at in Cambridge, we have a movie theater in Harvard Square. It's like this gigantic movie theater, and on some of the most expensive real estate in the world, and it's been vacant for 8-10 years. And so the city's been talking about taking it by eminent domain. That's again like a political calculation that you all have to make, so that this may not be the solution to that problem you're describing, but it might be a solution to a different problem, or it might be some version of it would address that.
And again, I'll go back to, obviously, Allie, whatever we come up with is going to go by the city attorney, but our initial I think our initial thoughts, if I'm not trying to speak for the whole committee here, but our initial thoughts were that we would be somewhat lenient on those storefront owners who were actively marketing their properties. Problem is we have the exact opposite, where we have storefront owners that aren't even trying. So, we probably would try to incorporate that kind of differential in our penalty, which is there's a legitimate local real estate for lease sign on the building, and they're showing the property, and we know there's activity with the realtors bringing them through. They're just not getting any bites right now for whatever reason. We're not so sure that we would want to slap them as opposed to these properties that have been vacant for more years than I can count on my fingers and toes.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason of like sitting down and talking to people and like getting a sampling, like a geographic sampling, and like a different building type, different zoning sampling of, because it's sort of like your qualitative research. Like sit down with me like a human being and tell me what your problems are, and you may find out things that never would have crossed your mind.
Yep, good point. Good point.
Other questions? Amazing. Allie, thank you for joining us today. That is one of the best formatted contemporary PowerPoint presentations I have seen in ages. Really well done.
Thank you.
Well attuned to a range of audiences. Nicely done. Thank you so much for sharing that with us in that way. That content.
Thank you, Ellen. It's great.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. And I talk about this stuff all the time. It's like I'm popular because of it. So I'm just used to it. I could probably do it in my sleep at this point. But if you have any follow-up questions that come up, whether it's, a couple hours from now or a couple months from now, just send me an email and I'm happy to add my 2 cents.
Hey, Allie, do you know other cities that are actively considering this right now in Massachusetts that would be like a sister city to us or something?
Yeah, so after we did this, Hull passed something, Melrose, Maynard. I've talked to someone from the city of Northampton multiple times. I can't remember who.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, so check and see what sort of research they've done in Northampton as well. I'm trying to think of anywhere else that's more like out in your area, but I can't think of anything offhand.
Gwen, I'm wondering if Allie could share that PowerPoint with you, that we would have it available, because there's a lot of information in there that's going to help us put together our proposal.
I wonder, would that be okay with you, Allie?
Oh, yeah, no problem. I sent it to Cassie already, but I'll send it to you, Gwen, and I'll also send you the actual bylaw language.
That's perfect.
Yeah, so you have that to work with as well.
Okay, I'm sorry, Cassie, I didn't realize you had it already, but
That's okay.
As long as someone here has it, that's what we need, because that language is going to be important for us.
Ellie, I've got one more question while you're here. When you're looking at the registration fee versus not the threat, but the reality of building inspector checking quarterly, do you think that the building inspector aspect of it is the biggest bite, is the biggest pusher? Because I don't think anybody wants the building inspector coming in. They don't have to.
They don't want to talk to any of us. Like, this is anathema. Mr. Dirt on My Shoe, I hate talking about him, but he's like the best example because he owns skyscrapers in downtown Boston. He is very wealthy. The $400 fee was so offensive to him. It was like the principle was just disgusted him that the town, and we don't make money on this. Like, this is definitely not a money-making effort. And like, we absolutely lose money if you want to like crunch the numbers like the town does. But man, my first round of interactions is always pretty brutal. And then I've gotten to know people over time and it's been better. And I talk to Mr. Dirt on My Shoe's son now. We get along much better. but the building inspector is the heavy. So I'm like I come in and I'm like, I send the letter that's like very stern, and then we talk, and then they're like, okay, sometimes, usually, and then, but if they're like playing me, I get, they get like served paperwork. The guy who didn't pay the fee, like someone delivered that to his doorstep. So yeah, they don't like that at all. That's where I put that off as long as I can. We've only had to do it once, but yeah, that's a major deterrent.
Thanks.
Yeah. And their enforcement at the end of the day, right? I'm just some like planning lady, but they're the ones who can actually like whack them with the fee.
Interesting.
Thank you again. I hope you have a great evening. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sally.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Ally.
So, great. I thought that was very informative and useful. Cassie, what a tremendous connection. Thank you for making that go. Appreciate you.
Sorry, I was late.
That's okay. Life happens. Let's see. We do not have very much time left in our meeting today, so I will say this. Jeff cannot join us today. So if you want, if there are updates that you know about, like we did last meeting where we round robined planning department related news and information that are not related to social media guidance or the weekend downtown rounds bus updates that are elsewhere on our agenda, feel free to offer those now. But otherwise we can move on to item 5, which is updates on our calendar year 2021 goals.
Oh, I think I have an update. I think that ADUs and I think it was multifamily permitting went through the planning board successfully, unanimously, and that's going to be hitting the city council soon.
Great.
Nice.
Thanks for, I didn't get to go to that. I was in a different meeting. I assume that you were there and it went productively, constructively? No.
I couldn't go either.
Okay. All right.
Gwen,
Any other planning department related news?
Gwen, I did have a chance to speak to Jeff. I did have a chance to speak to Jeff about the potential penalty for vacant storefronts.
Uh-huh.
And he did say that a general ordinance, I'm not sure what else there is, but a general ordinance is much more forceful. We did simply talk about a penalty. We weren't, obviously I didn't know anything about this registration process. We were simply talking penalty. He did say that it was much better if we had language that had been adopted by another community rather than coming back and just saying we created this on our own. We came up with this idea. Having Ally's language is, obviously adapting it to our use is much more forceful. And then what we would do is have a city councilor bring that forward to the full council. They would automatically just refer it to their subcommittee, and the subcommittee would then chew on it. We'd probably have to be at a couple of meetings with them, and then ultimately they would bring it to the full council for approval. So obviously we would have some massaging to do of some. I like that introductory language that Arlington has about the reason why they're putting it in place, that we don't all realize this, but it affects you and me on our personal property taxes. If you have those kinds of issues in your downtown, people may not want to move here, may not want to live here and buy property here. So it's a fairly simple process. I think our counselor, Gwen, and mine, I'm not sure about Chris, Tom Peak, is on that ordinance subcommittee. So we could easily get Tom to bring it forward once we've drafted the language that we would love to have in that ordinance. That was it.
All right. Any other planning department related stuff before we get some quick updates about our other items? Nope. Okay. Casey, did you have a chance to look into what guidance might exist around social media?
Not necessarily, but I had Kim research a little bit. She just eager to go with content. We sort of talked about just sharing minutes and agendas as potential things that would be appropriate to EDIC. So she's just kind of waiting for permission to see what she can post. And we came up with the idea that maybe it's just information about minutes and agendas, you know, awareness of pre-existing stuff that people then can look at further, not necessarily a yay or nay opinion, but more of an educational awareness stuff. Hey, EDIC is interested in this, or here's public concerns around Dunkin' Donuts, or, you know, things, that kind of thing. So it's kicked around a little bit, but a little bit more of permission. I think maybe if we put together samples that we could share for the group's opinion on whether or not that's the right direction.
I'd love that.
Okay.
I think that would be great. Yeah.
And how would we get that information? Could we get that to you singly, or do we have to give all information across the board? Right.
Meaning send it to me versus send it to everybody, BCC?
Yeah. What's the
I think if you send it BCC to everybody, it will prevent a group discussion outside of a meeting, but everyone will have a chance to look at it.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So, Tom, weekend downtown rounds bus. There were many things that got assigned to you. Sorry about that. And also thank you for taking that on. What do you know?
No problem. I did talk to Brendan Rogers, who's the director of the COA, and he's definitely open to us using their vans. There's only one little, maybe not so little, stumbling block to it, in that for insurance and liability purposes, at least for now, it needs to be a city employee, city councilor, some elected official who drives the bus. Or I shouldn't even say elected, maybe employee. So, for example, when we did the drive around town with the lady who did the housing study, we got on that van and Jeff was driving. Scared the hell out of me because he kept looking back and talking to us, but Jeff was driving. So again, as far as the use of the van, Brendan's very open to us using it. I'm not sure how we get around that other issue, because I had mentioned the possibility of someone who might be involved with the senior tax work-off program who needs hours without technically getting paid. They're getting paid by a reduction on their taxes. And he was going to look into that. I may look into that myself with the mayor. I happen to be on that committee also, so I can speak to those folks. If it's all about liability and insurance, and can we find someone that we could night for a day, night for a season, to say you're authorized to drive this bus. So I will follow up with that.
Hey, Tom, I have a question about that follow-up. You know, all of us are special city employees because we're on this board, which is why we had to go through all of that ethics training and stuff. We just don't get paid. I wonder if we qualify as well.
I can definitely ask that, Chris. If we
or any committee member throughout the city.
I can definitely. I'll follow up with EDIC members, and more importantly, I think because there's some benefit to it, can we somehow get a waiver for the senior tax work-off employees?
Tom, what was Brendan's last name again?
Rogers.
Okay, thanks.
And by the way, the reason I thought after I was done with Brendan that I thought that might work for the senior tax work-off folks is they are actually going to be classified as employees of the city. So it could be a double benefit for them or us. They get some hours in. They need to do 111 hours a year a fiscal year to get $1,500 off their annual tax bill.
Is that the maximum they can get off their tax bill?
Correct.
Okay. So there's no incentive to work 112 hours?
Correct.
Okay, thank you for that. Very informative and useful. We're making progress. It's 5 o'clock. Are there any new topics that you know for sure we should talk about next month? All right, great. We have 3.5 weeks to figure out what else we want to talk about. And
Is there
we
a
will have-
follow-up on the vacant storefront besides just getting the presentation and the language?
Good question.
Should I try and figure out what's going on in Northampton? I have no idea how to start, but I'm very good at just dialing the phone.
I mean, if someone in Northampton has talked to them, Mo, you have connections there too.
Well, I'm wondering if it's Terry Masters. I thought he was the economic development person over there. Let me just look. Actually, I can look it up for you.
The other thing is, I don't know if we've categorized the vacant storefronts and what kind of approach, do we want to put them in different approach categories? I know that, the Hurry and Scurry and the Moriarty building would be in one kind of category, but yet other storefronts might be in other categories, which aren't, what I mean? It's a whole different ball of wax in how we approach them. Or is it just across the board, they treat them all the same?
Meaning before we get to the point of applying whatever ordinance we might propose, like exhaust all of our options, are they in different categories of how we approach that?
Right, and see if a little letter writing or the personal connection that she was talking about might start us to go in a particular direction to get results, as opposed to just trying to come up with a whole plan and then implement it. Is there a way to maybe approach the subject first and have it evolve as we go through the process of putting in the fines and the structures around that?
I think a parallel operation makes a lot of sense. And also, you've asked repeatedly, Casey, do we have a list of vacant storefronts that we're interested in addressing in our commercial district? So I don't have a strong sense that we have that list readily accessible the way Arlington does. So to me, that is the merit of a registry, is like voluntelling us, look, this is vacant, rather than us having to go find it out ourselves. And then being able to monitor that over time. That's the value of the registry idea to me. And also this idea that it is a way of connecting property seekers or site seekers to existing, like that's a really great benefit of that. So do we have a sense that is a list that exists somewhere, or do we have a first step there? Or do we want to just focus simultaneously? Do we have 3 paths where we're like, we need a list of all of them? Also, we know a couple of our main initial big conversations, and also here are some other people we might want to talk to.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I think as Allie went through her presentation, when she mentioned the storefront vacancy registry, that rang a big bell with me. Like, yes, we need that. We need the registry. Where I got off track is when she went on to say that getting on that registry sounds like a bad thing because you're going to get a $400 annual fee. I think we need to create this registry so we put our arms around it. I would just be careful that the connotation is that it's a bad thing when you get on that registry, because again, we might have very legitimate business owners that are trying like heck to rent their storefronts. They're listed with a realtor. They're showing it regularly. I'm thinking of the Manchester property that is actively being marketed. There are several people looking at that strongly. So I would hate like heck to jump in and say, oh, by the way, you're going to go on a registry and there's going to be a $400 fee, as opposed to, I know this is a bad sort of example, but as opposed to the Moriarty building. But I think a registry, getting our arms around what's vacant, and having that I think it's and we can check with Jeff to make sure it doesn't already exist. I doubt it does.
I doubt it does too. And I think we can get away from the idea of a registry and more to the idea of let us help you make this information accessible. Is this a struggle right now? Okay, fine. And so I think that you can get away from that penalizing sort of connotation or even language.
Yep.
I like your metaphor of putting our arms around it, like literally hug that idea that we have that information, because that's very useful.
And when you mentioned business district, Gwen, that's one other piece that Jeff cautioned us on, which is we need to define a specific district. So we're talking Main Street, Union Street, and Cottage Street. He was concerned if this applied to Northampton Street, for example, because there's a lot of new construction going up and the rental might be active. They might be actively working on renting it because they just built it. He didn't get into a lot of detail, but he was concerned if we went outside of that downtown business district.
Okay. Yeah, I think that there are nuances here that are worth talking about. So I think that this is both, Cassie, I'm glad you asked this question at the end. Good job figuring out what the heck are our next action steps. Mo, did you find the name that you're looking for?
Yeah, it's Terrence Masterson. I just put it in the chat. I was trying to find his email address and I don't have it, but he was with the city of Northampton, economic development director.
Great.
Mo, is Wayne Fiden like Jeff's counterpart?
That I don't know. I've never met. Let's see what I've met. I know Terry, but I don't know. Let's see. It's funny because their website doesn't give. Let me see if I can pull up the planning department. Planning and sustainability.
So while you're doing that, I was thinking to Cassie's point, why don't we put on the agenda for next month to come up with a whole strategy on what to do next and who's going to do what. And in the meantime, hopefully we'll get a copy of the ordinance, which might answer a lot of the questions we just spoke about. Because there seems to be some sort of mechanism where they do work with people who are trying and push harder on those that don't. And I could only assume that the ordinance has something to speak about that.
It seems to me too, to have the registry to begin with gives you leverage and footing to move to that next phase. And it kind of sets up the thing like, okay, now we're doing this new thing, as opposed to going right after. You have to, like Allie was saying, keeping it consistent for everyone, and you have to begin somewhere. And I know that there's a particular result that folks might like to see, but I don't know if you can do that immediately. You have to and that's what the registry says to me. You're setting it up.
Right. I agree with you that registry is actually a good base, and that waiving fees can come after that. But basically saying that this is a new arm of the EDIC is that we simply are going to keep registration. And even if it's a quick turnover, like we know a place is empty because it's going to be rented again, it still goes on the registry for a month or two just to be consistent.
Yeah.
Because it's information, and that being able to track that kind of, here we're seeing certain short-term vacancies where vacancy is defined as empty at all, versus the ones that become the problem children.
Exactly.
Because you can note month after month, okay, this one is still on the list. It's still on the list. We've reached 8 months. We've reached 12 months.
It seemed to me that they had built-in flexibility to work with folks the way that we've been talking about, and you're concerned, Tom. It seems like, it wasn't so rigid that they weren't able to say, okay, now you've made contact with me and now we're working through this together.
Yeah, I think if we had guidelines that said, if you do this, this, and this, and this, you're going to avoid the fee. But if you don't do this, we just have to be careful that it doesn't come out as any type of, redlining, if you will, or blatant discrimination, that we're going after somebody. I agree with you. Creating that registry as a whole is going to prevent that from happening. But then if we make exceptions to that on who's going to pay and not, I think we're okay.
you have to have guidelines as to how you handle that, right?
What's that?
You have to have guidelines as to how you handle that, all right?
Correct.
So, we have guidelines, okay, so we're making an exception. We're making exceptions because, you have proven that you're having a financial challenge at the moment, or,
You've got a realtor who's representing the property.
yeah, you know what I mean? I think it was pretty, they had that built in. So answer to your question, Tom, Wayne Fadden,
Biden.
he is the director of planning and sustainability. And then.
He's Jeff's counterpart.
That sounds similar to Jeff, yeah.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like to me. And then, yeah, I don't see Terrence on here.
So it sounds to me like we have a lot to talk about at our next meeting, and also it's not impossible that in the intervening month, a group of us could get together and talk through a proposed strategy and send that to the rest of the group for to have something other than a blank page to look at in June. So I would be happy to be part of that. I feel like EDIC is really jazzed about this, and that is great. It's very exciting. So is there anybody who wants to volunteer to be part of a subcommittee of 8 people? Okay, wow. All right, great.
Ooh, sorry.
Casey, Chris, Cassie.
I will also volunteer. I had to turn off my camera because I'm having some connectivity issues, but
This is great.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Paul. All right. Okay.
I'll be on it too, but I'm going to be in California for a good part of the next 3 weeks. But, as long as you can deal with me 3 hours earlier.
Well, gosh, it sounds like the entire EDIC would like to be part of this. Holy smokes.
Yeah, I was going to suggest, Gwen, you might just have another interim meeting or something.
Yeah, we might just have another meeting. Yeah. We could do that. Yeah. So I would be happy to send you guys a little doodle poll, and we can find a time that's mutually agreeable, maybe the first week of June.
So I have to share that the last week of May and the first week of June, I will be on vacation, the first time off that I've had since March of 2020. And unfortunately, I will be offline. Somebody comes to me and FaceTimes with their head in flames, and I need to see it on FaceTime. I will not be here.
Will not be on fire. Are you okay with the rest of us having a meeting about this to get going on this for June?
I am. I would love to be there, but I really need to disconnect. So I appreciate the work you'll put in. Thank you.
Yes. Take care of yourself. If you haven't got your health, you haven't got anything. Thank you, Princess Bride.
Take care of those plants.
Yeah.
Yes.
So great. I will send you a little doodle for Tuesday. Can we do a Tuesday? Do you want to just assume June 1st? Okay. So I will send you some times. We can try for 4 o'clock. Do we want to just say that? And I'll ask Zoe if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. All right. I will assume that for now.
It's going to be a meaningful endeavor.
Yeah.
I think we're going to end up getting into condemned properties too. I think we're going to have to. I think so too.
Yeah.
Well, I love nuance, so this is going to be great. All right, let's end this meeting unless somebody has something burning their brain that they need to share.
I do actually. Oh, I was going to make
Chris.
it, but no, I was going to make the motion as a joke, but anyway, someone beat me to it.
Fair enough. Okay. All right. All in favor of leaving? Holler aye. Great. Nice to see you all. I'll send you a little meeting invite.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.